Hello and welcome to Game Changer Live, brought to you by Connor's Coaching. We created this show in our growing community to share about topics of positivity, coaching, personal development, mindset, and more. And we go live to bring you the most unedited and authentic version of ourselves. And we bring guests on every other week. We start live on Wednesdays at 3:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and I'm so thankful to have you here with us today. Our motto, Together We Inspire. Today, I am joined by my guest, Jodi Hummer of Caldera Coaching. Jodi is a PCC certified coach specializing in major transitions in life, such as especially divorce and career. Jodi is here to talk with us more about that today. But Jodi, before we get started in that, in your own words, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us more about your coaching?
Sure, Daniel. Thank you, first of all, for having me. I feel honored, respected, appreciated to be requested, and I'm excited to be here. So, background of my coaching and a little of what I do and what I'm about. So, the exposure to coaching for me was close to 20 years ago. It was interesting because I was going through a divorce sometime before that, did not know what coaching was. And when I found out what it was, I thought, well, that's what I was looking for back then. So, in essence, I had some exposure quite some time ago. I've been in this business now for 15 years. I got credentialed around 12 years ago, or went through the program and got credentialed around 12 years ago. The start of my business was because I was working in organizational human resources type roles and had some exposure to folks that were going through some career changes. And so there was an initial drive to help people and support people through that even before I got credentialed. And then when I got exposure to other types of coaching and went through my 2-year program, I realized how much coaching could do for people. And I was so excited to be a part of that community and to be able to provide that to others. For anyone who knows me, they know that I wake up each day kind of with a mission to brighten somebody's life. That could be as simple as smiling at somebody when I walk down the street, even if they don't smile back. I'm the person that waves when I'm driving and just kind of wave to people from the steering wheel, just hopefully to make them smile. So that's kind of who I am as a whole. And then when you think about what I do now, it is incredibly fulfilling because I'm able to do it in a way that's purposeful, that's much deeper, that really provides people a new sense of life where they feel like they may have come at a crossroads.
Yeah, I love that. I love that because everything about that is so authentically you as well, because that's definitely been my experience. Just a little background. We met through Oregon ICF, which is the local chapter of the International Coaching Federation, and you encouraged me to volunteer for a leadership role, and you're just full of encouragement, full of brightness, and I appreciate that about you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I think before we get into the topic today, it would really help the audience to know who among us, who's listening to this, that really could benefit from listening to what you have prepared to talk to us about today.
Sure, sure. So the essence of what I want to cover today gets into the nature of a divorce and how when we hear the word divorce, we automatically think something negative. And generally it is. It starts off that way, and understandably so. It's the end of a chapter in our lives. It's certainly not what we had planned when we got married the first time. And so if you have listeners in your audience who have been through this or are exposed to people who go through this, the idea here is to help folks understand that there is a brighter side. There is something more to life after a divorce comes. And if you notice the name of my business, Daniel, it's Caldera Coaching. And I designed that name, and I went through a lot of different names over quite a period of time before I chose it. If anyone doesn't know what a caldera is, it is the aftermath of a volcano. So a volcano erupts, creating death and destruction. It essentially, levels all natural life around it and just creates a horrific situation. That's a lot like what can happen in a divorce for many people, as well as a career change. And so when something comes to an end, like a volcano, and it just feels so heavy and feels so big, we're like, oh my gosh, what's next? Where do I go from here? And so a caldera is formed in the aftermath of a volcano by that crater that is where the volcanic eruption took place. And over a period of time, water fills that crater. And if you've ever visited a caldera, of course, there's one in Oregon, there's one in Santorini, Greece that I visited. You'll see that it is something that people travel thousands of miles to see because it's such a beautiful thing. And so I named my business Caldera Coaching because it's turning something that starts off as negative and sad and difficult and essentially life ending, it feels, into something that's quite beautiful and something that people can admire as they look at it.
Love that. I love that metaphor. And I love the fact that, there's a lot of coaches, like me included, who really focus on transition. But you've picked a transition in life that people, I mean, hopefully don't have to experience, but most of us do. Like a large majority of people do end up experiencing this. And yet it can feel like something that, not even like with a career, you know that there's a retirement at the end of it, but with a marriage you don't think there's a divorce at the end of it. And so it's a life transition that so many people experience but are completely unprepared and completely unsupported for. And so I think that actually wanted to call out one thing that you mentioned when we were talking about this episode, and that is that you've talked to lawyers out there who are really thankful to have you working with their clients. And I just thought that was a great testament. A great testament.
Yeah, a lot of attorneys will say to me, I've heard it from a couple just last week, is that their hourly rate is pretty high, and they'll have clients come in that want to talk about what's happening and the emotion of it, and they get into all that. And these attorneys have said to me, I can't help them with that. And I'm telling them, hey, you're welcome to take this time and spill everything that's going on, but know that you're paying a really high hourly rate. And I can't do anything for you in this respect. And so they are appreciative to have somebody like me and my peers available to support their client because they recognize that there are situations where somebody needs additional support, and it may not be counseling. As one couples therapist said to me years ago, just because your marriage is broken doesn't mean you are. And so some people think, well, should I go to counseling? If you truly feel broken and you feel like you're trying to get to ground level zero, absolutely, it's a great avenue to go. But there's a lot of folks that are like, okay, I just don't know what's next. I don't know how to get there. I don't know where I'm going from here. And that's really where coaching comes into play. The attorneys want to see their clients, finalize this whole thing with as much of a smile on their face as possible, right? I mean, it's not a great situation in that moment, but to see it moving in a positive direction, that's the best we can hope for.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know that you work with a lot of people who are in that kind of situation, in the divorce situation, where they're feeling stuck. They don't know what their future is going to look like. But what are some of the pitfalls that people kind of find themselves in when they go through a divorce without a coach, without that kind of emotional support?
Oftentimes, and the biggest I would say is getting stuck in their past. Your life up until this point had this cadence, it had this routine. There are things that you were doing that were your, day to day, and now that's all changing. And we as human beings cling to what's comfortable. We cling to what feels familiar. We cling to what is normal. And suddenly our life doesn't feel so normal. And so people will really get caught up in that and they'll think back to their past and they'll think, well, gosh, if this just hadn't happened, or if that hadn't happened, or if I'd changed this, and they just get so caught up there. And or if they're spending time around people that are a big part of their past that keeps reminding them of these types of things. These pitfalls can really pull a person backward and make them feel like I am never going to move forward. I'm stuck here. What am I going to do? Because this chapter of my life has ended, but I can't seem to start writing the new one. And so that's a huge pitfall. It really gets into a lack of visioning, right? So if we don't necessarily see where we're going in the future, we don't know how to get there. And I've often said that, people will start driving, but if they don't know where they're going, they feel like they're spinning their wheels. And if they leave their driveway and they make a left and then a right and then another left at the next stop sign, if they don't know where they're going, at the end of the day, they might end up just back at that driveway and go, my gosh, I put all this effort in, but I didn't get anywhere. And so that lack of vision can be a major pitfall, which is where coaches come in. We can help people discover that if they don't know what that looks like. That's the heart of what we do, is helping people define and understand their vision. But those are tough pieces. There are so many elements that come in with divorce that vary from person to person, from the family situation of having children or what's happening to the home. Are you staying in the home? Are you leaving the home? Are both people leaving the home? What happens with children? There's all the financial elements that come along with it. I mean, it really changes from person to person. So there's so much to consider, and it can weigh on people. It can really weigh a lot on folks.
You're really rewriting your entire world, and you're doing it in a really quick way. We all change over time, but when you go through a divorce, it's like a massive change to everything that defines you. So it makes sense that having that coach there to support that normal coaching stuff of let's set a goal, let's set a trajectory for our future and where we're going to go, but on a massive scale, like on a total life altering scale. So yeah, that makes that makes total sense. And so um you mention the bright side of divorce. So we've talked about kind of some of the darker stuff, but it's kind of hard for us as people to hear the word divorce and to think, oh, there's an upside to this. Obviously, you're getting rid of some stress, but
True.
what are some of the other bright sides that you see working with your clients?
Well, back to the comment about visioning the future. I think one of my proudest moments when I'm working with someone, and I probably first saw this even 25 years ago, before I was technically a coach. When you see a light bulb go off over someone's head, and Daniel, I'm not sure if you've seen that before, but I will actually almost physically see a light bulb above someone's head. And it's like, oh, possibility. They're getting it. They're recognizing what the potential is. And that is such an exciting thing to see. And so when you talk about the bright side of divorce, the idea here is that my life is not over. This portion of my life may have come to an end, and that chapter is done, but I got a whole life ahead of me. And so the positive aspects of this, the bright side of it is, what can I do now? There's a reference in, I think it was Huffington Post, where it talked about people actually being thankful for their divorce. And one person even referenced the fact that, she said, my husband and I weren't great together. We had a toxic marriage, but apart, we are better people. And hopefully they gained from the experience, right? That which does not kill you makes you stronger is a very common phrase. And I think that if people can focus on what I can take away from this and where I can apply this in multiple aspects of my life, what lessons can this be for my children? How can I impart something positive on others? There's a lot of brightness and beauty, not to just mention the fact that if that marriage was toxic or even just unhealthy in some way, you get the chance to be you again. You get to get out of that situation and feel free, feel the ability to be yourself and not have those restraints around you, the constraints, and feel like I don't have to answer to anybody now. My decisions are my decisions, and whatever I want to do can go. And there's a lot of beauty in that, which a lot of people have a tough time seeing at first, understandably.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And a lot of times it's that they're hung up on past expectations, right? That they're dragging along these expectations they felt like they had to live by this whole time, and they no longer suit them. They no longer fit their new life.
Right,
So
right.
yeah.
And there are pieces of their past, Daniel, that are very important that they can take along with them, right? Because we're not saying goodbye to everything. And there are components that can be, thread into their future, right? Tied into it. It's a matter of what makes most sense for that individual.
That makes sense. Well, so if someone is listening right now and they're going into this stage of their life, or they know someone who's going into this stage of life, what are some real practical tips that they could just start going in a positive way now?
So I mentioned the concept of vision, and many of us have heard of this idea of a vision board. And I will share with the audience here that I myself did a vision board, not necessarily with any intention of where it would go, other than giving me some guidance. And what was really interesting for me is when I created my own vision board. And if for anyone who's listening doesn't know what that is, you're kind of taking newspaper clippings or headlines of something or photographs or things you've clipped out of a magazine, et cetera, and literally putting them on like a poster board. And when I did that, I pulled some notes that people had sent me over the years or cards in addition to all that. And what I realized once I put the board together was so much of what was on that board was already in my life. And so that was a pretty cool thing to experience and realize maybe I don't have so far to go, right? Maybe my vision isn't so far out of reach like I thought it was. And so I think visioning in that respect can be something so easy for anyone to do. It just takes sitting down, applying it, doing it. And some people will lack some motivation there. Admittedly, I use this reference with clients all the time. It's much easier to go empty the dishwasher than it is to do something that's deep and thought provoking and might make us a little bit sad or might make us, feel a little heavy. And so we'll go cross things off the to-do list, like emptying the dishwasher, because that's easy. I can check it off the list. And so the idea here is that if you can dedicate yourself and try some things in the visioning space, look toward the future, it can be very healing. And frankly, a lot of folks will take up new hobbies as well, right? So go take a gardening class or go do some new hiking that you've never tried, or just try some activities that you either have a passion of enjoying or that you've always thought about but never really pursued. And if a person's struggling with that, right? If they say, well, gosh, this all sounds lovely, Jodi, but I just don't see myself doing those things, right? I can't jumpstart myself. That's certainly where a coach comes in, right? Because and if you talk to any of my past clients, what they'll tell you is that idea of having a coach to pull things out of you, to understand what the potential barriers are to you achieving what you've set out for yourself. That is the essence of coaching, right? It is that idea that this coach can help me stay on track, help me move toward my goals, help me continue this forward progress with less things jumping in my way, those barriers.
Yeah. And that is so important. You mentioned a coach there. So if someone is looking into getting a coach in this area, maybe you, since you're so experienced, what are some things that they should be aware of or think about going into that?
So first off, personality fit. And that goes for, I think, any type of psychological care that somebody pursues and even medical care in many cases. But you want to make sure that you trust this person, that you feel as though they are a good balance of who you are. I always do interviews with potential clients because I want them to know I'm high energy. I talk fast. I'm a cheerleader by nature, right? Like I'm go, 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 let's get this done. And not everybody wants that. Maybe they want somebody who's a little more laid back, a little bit who maybe they're not quite so upfront or however you want to reference me. But the idea is that you have a match, that you have a connection, and that person feels like they can work for you. So I would say certainly look for that. I'm also big on credentialing, and that's not just because I'm credentialed, but I think a lot of people put that little life coaching hat on and say, yeah, I'm a life coach, and they've had no training in doing it. And in those cases, a lot of those folks end up consulting more than coaching. With coaching, as you know, Daniel, it is all about asking questions and not advising, not saying, well, when I went through my divorce, this is what I did, because I'm me, you're you. And so for me to tell you that the things that work for me are going to work for you, inappropriate, not the right place to be. And so finding somebody who is credentialed will ensure that you've got somebody who's a good listener. They're asking the right questions. They're leading you down a path that feels, again, positive and feels like yours.
Yeah. I have a personal question to ask you because I know that you're married now. Um, I I imagine that it's difficult, or that there are people get their ideas in their head when they hear that you're a divorce coach, but that you're married, happily married. How does that fit with you? Is there an identity issue there at all?
Oh, well, in a positive way, to be honest with you. What I'd say, my apologies. What I'd say is that, you know, well, first off, it's ironic because I didn't think about it at the time. But when I named my business Caldera Coaching, I didn't recognize the fact that my second marriage took place in Santorini, Greece, in front of a caldera. So it's almost kind of really interesting how that happened. But my time during the 6 years that I was single, really allowed for me to explore and understand better who I was, reassess. In essence, it was another chapter past the first marriage, right? So we have our childhood that's kind of a chapter in life, and then maybe there's a marriage at some point that's a chapter in life. And in my case, there was a next chapter that was all about understanding who I was, what was important to me, what role might I play in a future partnership. And so finding my current husband 17 years ago um, was for me one of the bright sides of the divorce. And one of the bright sides of that chapter to follow, where I really spent time understanding and knowing what I wanted in the future and where I wanted to go. So for me, I like to feel that my example, despite the fact that I've been divorced, is living proof that there is a beautiful life ahead. There's potential for it, right? And I'm one of those people that wakes up every day truly so thankful for what I've learned, what I've gained, for who I am, for how I show up in my marriage differently now than when I was in my 20s, and what I've learned. Again, it's all about kind of the live and learn reference.
Yeah. So, what are the next steps for someone who's looking at hiring you specifically? How can they find you? How can they connect with you? And what are some steps that they should take to get into that, to get into your list?
Sure, sure. So you can certainly contact me directly, and that can happen via my website, which is calderacoaching.com. Um, the idea, I think, of finding a coach, and by the way, we haven't talked about this, but so much of coaching takes place virtually now. And as you referenced, we met when I lived in Oregon. I now live in New Mexico. I used to live on the East Coast, but my clients are literally in 4 different time zones right now. So it is something very well that can be done virtually. Face to face is fantastic. And if somebody says, I really want to do something face to face, I would encourage you to look at the International Coach Federation. There is a directory on their website. You could look at who is within your space. You can look at who may specialize in what you do. Many towns, not all, but many places do have a chapter of the International Coach Federation. And so a person could find that local chapter, look at that chapter directory, and be able to find some of the folks that exist locally. Frankly, I have people, if they want to do face to face, some people contact me and say, can you refer me to somebody? And I've got great colleagues that I highly recommend for a variety of things, not just in the divorce space or career space, but in other areas of life. And so I refer out a lot too. And I think when you find a good coach, if they aren't the right fit for you, hopefully if they're a good person, they're going to help you find the right person. And
Yeah.
so if anybody has a question or just wants to chat with me, no problem. Don't hold back. My contact information is on my website. My email is very simple. It's jodi.hummer@gmail. So I'm easy to reach. But I love to be a conduit for whatever makes sense for somebody. Again, my goal is to help people find their truth, their happiness, find themselves. And if that's not via me in the long term, but can be a part of the short term, that's I'm still fulfilling my own goal.
I love that because I think you and I both love that aha moment too. Like that's our paycheck really, is seeing that realization of possibility that someone has where they decide this is what I actually want in my life and I can do that and here's how I do that. That's just such an empowering feeling. And at the end of the day, like that's the paycheck that I want to cash.
Absolutely, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I mean, the reality of it is, you know, I get so much out. I almost feel guilty sometimes because I feel like I get just as much out of a session as a client might because I generally finish feeling so invigorated for what they're feeling. It's that exchange of energy and feeling like I actually did something for somebody today. And especially if it's more than one in a day, right? It's just that kind of wow. My life is so purposeful.
Yeah,
So yeah.
it fills us. Well, um, let's see. Where are we? Oh, there was one other thing, and that it was something that happened just before we started our show today. You mentioned that there was an exercise that you could share with us. What is that exercise? Tell us more about that.
So one of the things that I often say to people, and this isn't just a client, but in general, I'll often ask people to vision what their life would be like in 1 year if they were to call me up and say, I never knew it could be this good. Like I love when people can just sit there and think for a moment, what would that look like? And so I have an exercise that I often do with people, and I encourage people, if you've got a pen and paper handy, I would encourage you to write out the words at the top. My life is ideal when dot, dot, dot. The idea of this exercise is to complete that sentence with as many things that come to mind. And as I've often shared to people, I might say it's sitting on a beach reading a book. I might say that it's spending time with my husband. I might say that it's when I'm laughing. I might say that it's when I'm community with some of my closest friends. I'm going to describe whatever comes to mind for me. I would encourage folks to put down whatever comes to mind for them.
Yeah.
And then the second step of the exercise is to look at what the core, what the root of those items are, and really what does that represent for you? What comes up for you?
Yeah.
And if we don't have the time today to take for people to really write out that entire list, but the next step after that would be, okay, so of these things, what's most important to me? And how do I feel about how present that is in my life? Because if on a scale of 1 to 10, I say that peacefulness is one of my my themes and things that are important to me. If I suggest that that's what's important to me and I rated a 3 out of a 10, I got some work to do. And so that can really help drive a lot of actions. So people say, gosh, I'm not sure what makes my life ideal. Well, this exercise can really help and can get a person over that hump of realizing, oh, these are the things that are really important to me. And if all these things were happening, if I was a 10 in every one of these categories, how blissful life would be.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a really interesting exercise. And I always tell people, really what it gets down to, Daniel, is what are your core values? And if you ask somebody what their values are, if I use that word up front, people say, oh, well, it's integrity and honesty, and they come up with, traditional values. Well, these things that you've identified that make your life ideal, that's what you value the most, right? And if that's time with family, or that's intellectual challenge in my life and my business, whatever it is for you, seek it out. What are some things you could do to get closer to that? And that's what we talk about in coaching, right?
Yeah.
Getting
It
people closer
reminds me
to
of
it.
my mother. I gotta give a shout out to her because she's my number one fan. She watches all of my episodes. So hi, mom. But she got chickens last year and she started raising chickens, and they're the most joyous things for her. They would be the least joyous things for a lot of people, but they're the most joyous things for her. And that so your list is going to look vastly different than someone else's list, and that's okay as well. You
It's
don't need to
absolutely,
like things that other people like. You get to like
absolutely.
things you like.
Well, as I saw on a Dove chocolate that I opened earlier today in the middle, the little sayings inside a Dove chocolate, it said, be unique, YOU, unique. We are all different human beings. I mean, literally, very different human beings. And so when we try, and, social media is one of those horrific pressures where we see everything happening to everybody else. And why isn't that happening to me? If you want it to happen to you, make it happen. If you don't, stop following everybody else's social media and feeling guilty about it, right? Be who you are. Seek out what you want. And that isn't necessarily what the next person wants.
Yeah, or what your spouse wants, which may lead you to down the road of divorce, and that's okay too,
Yeah, yeah,
because it
yeah,
makes room for those things that really do fit in your life.
yeah.
Well, Jodi, it has been a really great time talking with you today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me again. It was a pleasure, and I'm honored.
You're welcome. Well, thank you, audience, for watching us today. And if you found this inspirational, if you could just take a brief moment out of your day to hit the like button and to subscribe to more content, that would be really helpful. And if you want to go the extra mile and just leave us a comment about what inspired you today, that would be fabulous as well. We'd love to see it. And I will see you next week for another live episode at 3:30 on Wednesday. And remember our motto, together we inspire. See you then.